Falcon Lake, 1967. This photograph shows Stefan Michalak after his infamous encounter with a UFO. In the spring of 1967, while prospecting for precious stones, Michalak suddenly spotted two glowing objects hovering in the sky above him. One quickly vanished, while the other descended to the ground, settling close enough for him to reach out and touch its blistering hot metallic surface. According to his testimony, a hatch on the craft briefly opened, revealing a dazzling interior light, accompanied by an overwhelming stench of sulfur. As Michalak drew closer, the object abruptly lifted off, expelling a blast of scorching air from what he described as a vent-like exhaust. The searing heat struck him squarely in the chest, setting his clothing ablaze and burning his skin with a strange grid-like pattern. That pattern, clearly imprinted on his torso, was later photographed and became one of the most well-known pieces of physical evidence in UFO history. In the aftermath, Michalak fell gravely ill, displaying symptoms eerily similar to radiation poisoning. Teams of doctors and specialists examined him, yet none could pinpoint a definitive cause. The Canadian government launched its own inquiry, but, in its final report, conceded only that the incident defied explanation. The White Lady photograph. In the summer of 1975, Diane and Peter Berthelot visited the ancient Worsted Church in North Norfolk, England. Within the hushed interior, Diane chose a pew and sat quietly in prayer. Wanting to capture the serenity of the moment, Peter raised his camera and took a photograph of his wife. When the film was developed, both were astonished. Behind Diane, a pale, spectral figure appeared in the image, a woman in a flowing white robe, seated motionless on the bench. Startled, yet intrigued, the couple returned to the church in search of answers. There, a local parish representative recounted an old legend tied to the site. The spirit of the White Lady had often been seen within those walls. According to lore, she had once lived centuries earlier, remembered for her compassion and the miraculous healing she bestowed upon those who prayed. To many worshippers, her presence represented comfort and mercy. To this day, Peter's photograph is regarded as one of England's most famous examples of so-called spirit photography. And for those who still visit Worsted Church, the legend endures. Perhaps, in a moment of faith and silence, you too may glimpse the White Lady, the photograph of Mary Elizabeth, at her daughter's grave. In the year 1945, in Australia, a grieving mother named Mary Elizabeth visited the cemetery to pay respects at the grave of her 17-year-old daughter, Joyce. She brought along a camera, hoping to capture a few photographs as keepsakes. Mary took several shots from different angles around the site, but when the film was developed, she was stunned by an inexplicable detail. In one of the images, seated right beside Joyce's grave, was the figure of a small child. The child sat upright, gazing directly into the lens with wide, luminous eyes, as though aware that it was being photographed. Mary insisted that, at the moment she pressed the shutter, the cemetery had been completely empty, and there had been no children present. Moreover, she did not recognize the child in the photograph at all. The story spread quickly, with many suggesting that the figure might be the spirit of another child once buried in the same cemetery. Others interpreted the apparition as something more comforting, the soul of a young companion, appearing to keep Joyce company in the afterlife. The Mabel Chinnery Carr photograph. Another famous image was taken in the year 1959 by a woman named Mabel Chinnery. On that day, her husband was driving to visit the grave of Mabel's mother. Before they departed, Mabel stepped out of the car and took a photograph of her husband seated in the front. When the film was later developed, she was shocked to discover the outline of another figure inside the vehicle. Clearly visible in the back seat was a shadowy form, its piercing eyes shining as though caught by the camera's flash. The mysterious passenger appeared to be sitting silently just behind her husband, an unsettling presence in what should have been an empty car. The ghost of Bachelor's Grove. In the year 1991, at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois, one of the most famous ghost photographs in history was captured. The cemetery had long been shrouded in grim folklore, abandoned graves, whispered tales of wandering spirits, and reports of strange figures appearing in the night. During a paranormal investigation, members of the Paranormal Research Society of America set up cameras throughout the grounds. When the film was developed, one image shocked not just the team but the wider world. Seated quietly atop a weathered tombstone was the spectral figure of a young woman. She wore an outdated dress, her wavy hair and sorrowful posture evoking an era long gone. Her body appeared partly translucent, her legs seemingly dissolving into the stone beneath her. Strangely, none of the investigators present that night had seen her with the naked eye. The photograph spread quickly, hailed as one of the strongest pieces of evidence in the field of spirit photography. Skeptics argued that it was nothing more than a staged hoax or a trick of the light that coincidentally resembled a human form. Yet to many, the clarity of her image and the haunting melancholy in her expression were far too convincing. To this day, the photograph remains one of the most mysterious supernatural images ever taken, forever linked to the dark reputation of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery.